Now, to discuss the latest fallout between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we're joined from London by Jane Kinninmont, Deputy Head of the Middle East and North Africa Programme at Chatham House. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you, Lynda.
Firstly, just give us your perspective on the volatile relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and what do you make of this latest diplomatic fallout?
Well, it's very important, as your film highlighted, to be aware that these countries have a very long-standing rivalry, but at the same time, relations haven't always been as bad as they are today. There could be a lot of scope for economic cooperation between these two countries, for example. But right now, they find themselves on different sides of a host of conflicts in the region, above all in Syria, where they've been backing different sides for 5 years now in an extremely brutal civil war, but also in Yemen, to some extent in Iraq. And there's potential now for tensions to rise in countries like Lebanon and like Afghanistan, where they haven't been at each other's throats quite so much, but they still back opposing factions.
And looking at those wars in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, what do you think this diplomatic fallout will have? What sort of effect will it have on those wars?
It makes things go from bad to worse. We've already seen the Arab coalition led by Saudi Arabia announcing the end of what was already an extremely shaky ceasefire in Yemen just in the past few days. In Syria, one of the very, very few glimmers of hope there has been that last year Saudi Arabia and Iran did sit down together with other international powers to discuss the country's future. But these latest ruptures do place question marks over whether that process is going to itself be able to continue with any seriousness.
And Jane, this of course is not just about Saudi Arabia and Iran anymore. We've now seen Sudan, Bahrain, the UAE all responding. What are hardliners in the region saying, and are there moderates calling for an end to this diplomatic row?
Well, unfortunately, you are seeing the debate becoming increasingly polarised around sectarian lines. So there will be some Sunni activists who believe that Sheikh Nimr was unfairly treated or who opposed the death penalty, but very few of them are daring to speak out. It's really only Shia voices from Iran, Iraq and Lebanon that are loudly defending him. Meanwhile, it's very useful for a lot of countries to use this as an opportunity to get into the good books of Saudi Arabia, which is, of course, a massive source of foreign aid. So for a country like Sudan, traditionally, they actually had quite good ties with Iran. But now they're participating alongside Saudi Arabia in the war in Yemen, sending ground troops there. And by cutting diplomatic ties with Iran, they'll probably be hoping that they can get some more economic support from Saudi Arabia into their very impoverished country.
And looking at some of the other countries like Bahrain, it's quite interesting there where you've got a Sunni king yet a Shiite majority population. They too are asking their Iranian diplomats to leave. Could we see internal problems within these countries?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, Bahrain has seen unrest, particularly over the past 5 years since they had an uprising as part of the Arab Spring. That was largely driven by domestic demands for political reform, but the authorities sought to discredit that movement by saying that the protesters were essentially agents of Iran. There's a lot of fear among Sunnis in the region because they've seen the empowerment of a Shia government in Iraq after Saddam Hussein, which essentially took revenge on a lot of Sunnis that they blamed as associated with Saddam's regime. So in Bahrain, the Sunni minority became very frightened that even moderate democratic reforms wouldn't lead to real democracy, that they'd bring about even bloodshed, revenge killings and so forth. Tensions there have been heightened yet again by the spillover from this case of Sheikh Nimr.
Jane Kinninmont, we appreciate your perspective on all of this. Thanks very much for joining us. And you can stay up to date with the latest analysis on the Middle East by heading to our website, that's CNN.com, including this video explaining the differences between Sunni and Shia Islam. It is a must-watch to help you understand the recent developments in the region. Well, we'll have much more on this story just ahead, including changes in Saudi Arabia's foreign policy under King Salman during his first year in charge. Washington's ambassador to Riyadh will join us. for his take, plus prominent booksellers going missing in Hong Kong, why some people believe they were abducted by China.